Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dr. Psych Mom Show. Today, I'm going to talk about an interesting topic. I did a little video on it. Interestingly, my son, I always say to my kids, what should I do a video on? What should I do a video on? Because, I do so many videos. And my son said, how do the sibling relationships impact who you choose to marry? Because he knows I talk all the time about how what you see at home between your parents influences it. So he's the only 11-year-old that would ask that question. Child of a psychologist. That's what I did on the video. Hashtag child of a psychologist. I said my son suggested this. But anyway, I will talk about that just as soon as I tell you to subscribe. My most recent subscriber episode was entitled, Not Working is Pretty Terrible for Many People. And I talk about two groups, stay-at-home moms or dads of school-age kids and retirees. And so that plus over close to 180 extra episodes, if you subscribe $8.99 a month, man, do you get a lot for that, and you get to listen to all those hours and hours of extra DPM content. All right, so your sibling relationships also inform who you choose and how you relate within intimate relationships. Any relationship that you have a lot of time with that person impacts how you view relationships. When you're a kid, if you're the youngest child or the oldest child or the middle child, the birth order significantly impacts your self-concept, how your parents treat you, how your siblings treat you, how the people that you choose to hang out with. So, for example, oldest children are more often, they get divorced more. Only and oldest children have higher rates of divorce. And the more siblings older than you that you have, the lower your rate of divorce is. Why? Because you're used to dealing with shit, I mean, you're like the lowest man on the totem pole. While you may be coddled and babied in certain ways, everybody does stuff before you. So you're always getting taken to your siblings' events, and you see your parents focus on them as the first kid who goes to school, the first kid who goes to middle school, first kid who goes to high school, first kid who goes to college, first kid who gets a job, who has a boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever the case may be. You're never the first one. So by the time your parents get to you, they're pretty laid back. You have less rules, and you may get babied and coddled more. But there's also the part that you don't get all the focus. Oldest children also have, on average, 5 IQ points more than every subsequent child. IQ goes down, you get less parental resources. So oldest children are also more likely to go to Ivy League schools, etc. There's a lot of interesting research on birth order. But even irrespective of any birth order, the actual relationship that you have with your sibling, often that's more time spent with them than you spend with your parents, or even observing your parents, or that, your parents spend with any individual child, especially if there's a lot of children, or even if there's not. So don't give short shrift to this, to examining this and gaining insight from it, And in therapy, often I'm like, why did this child, this adult child now, interact in this sort of way with their spouse? Nothing that they're describing in their parental, in their relationship with a parent, is similar to this. But then we start talking about the siblings. So on the bad side, sibling bullying is real, and it's not always focused on. Some people minimize it, and, nowadays it's minimized less, but it used to be just like that's like literally your sibling. Like, remember Wonder Years? I always talk about Wonder Years. Remember Wayne? Wayne terrorized Kevin, right? And so, if Kevin gets married and somebody's like, his wife's being a real bitch to him, like, he's probably going to tolerate it more than he would have if he didn't have Wayne terrorizing him all the time, because that's kind of what he expects the relationship to go like. And similarly, Wayne, if he gets married, will probably be more of an asshole to his wife because he's used to being able to do that, and that was his role, was the one who was teasing and bullying the other one. On the other hand, if you're learning from your sibling relationship how to be close and intimate and have deep conversations and have each other's back and share and, really look out for each other, then you are going to bring that team-oriented dynamic into intimate relationships later on. And this isn't only cross-gender, although cross-gender really does help. In fact, there's research that indicates, and I love this research because I have a youngest son and then two older sisters, it says that boys with older sisters are more successful with women. Well, of course they are, because they've been listening to women talk about what they like, what they don't like, their travails with boys. Like my two daughters, like basically got my son ready for middle school, everything from his haircut to his outfit to how he should talk. I mean, they were like game planning him coming in and being cool in middle school, and that is something that you can't really replicate as a parent. Because I don't really know what cool is in middle school. As cool as, of course, I am. Haha, I'm not cool anymore or probably ever, but though I certainly am not anymore. And so that help is really instrumental, that guidance. And also, even if they didn't take any sort of instrumental help, he's watching them, he's listening to them, he's comfortable talking to girls because that's the only one he has to talk to in the house is girls, And so his relationship, probably when he's older, he would be comfortable with a woman who's like, why don't you wear this outfit, right? Because literally he's being told that from the time that he's small, And so it's very easy to see how that would move over to being more comfortable with, for example, receiving feedback. And that variable in and of itself could explain why younger brothers of older sisters are more successful with women, because the thing that women hate the most is defensive. And I talk about that a lot. Difficult, defensive, argumentative guys. And if you're used to receiving feedback from an older sister, then it's great. You already know how to do that. However, if your older sister was a bully, and that does happen, that older sisters bully the younger brother, then you don't trust women as much as you would if you had not been in that situation. And it's obviously very similar. I have, unfortunately, many female clients over the years who were abused by their older brothers, sexually abused. Now that is obviously terrible. No matter where you get the sexual abuse from is terrible, but somebody who literally lives with you, and is expected to hang out with you, that you are left alone with. I mean, this is like almost the worst, out of anything, because you can't tell anybody. If you do tell anybody, your parents don't want to believe something bad of their other child in some cases. Of course, in some cases, they do, and they separate and all sorts of stuff. But in the most pernicious cases, you're just stuck with this older brother who's abusing you. And boy, does that make women traumatized. I mean, you can't trust any man if you've been in that sort of situation because your closest peer was abusing you, of the opposite gender, right? And on the other side of the spectrum, if you're a girl who was treated really well by a protective, loving older brother, that's what you're going to be drawn to in a husband. And daddy's girl is good and nice unless it gets to be too much, but like anything. But there's almost no downside of having a loving, protective older brother. He can't actually inflict any rules or on you or control you in any bad way. He just kind of looks out for you. And so girls who have good relationships with older brothers expect that a man is going to be, interested in them and listen to them and protect them and think that they're cute and, and sweet and all sorts of things that are positive about the relationship. And it's so interesting how often people get into relationships that parallel the age difference that they even had with the sibling, and they don't even realize it at the time. So for example, a girl will have a husband who's 4 years older and the brother was 4 years older, and she doesn't even think about it, that she probably relates to him in much the same way as she did to her brother. Also, people with siblings versus only children are more used to teasing, they're more used to sharing, they're more used to, having to deal with limited resources that divide across the 2 or 3 or however many there are, so they're better at living with somebody later on. Only children have the highest divorce rates. And of course, you can understand why, right? Because they didn't get used to living with people. And that's kind of a really big part of marriage. And they didn't get used to teasing. They tend to take things more personally because they don't get that teasing. A parent doesn't really tease a child in the same way that a sibling does. So when you get used to that, then it makes it easy for you to be non-defensive. So a lot of this is the better a relationship you have with your sibling, the more you end up non-defensive in later adult intimate relationships. And sometimes the relationship parallels it exactly. So there's almost similar sorts of teasing, similar joking, even similar activities. Now, what about if it's a same-sex sibling? Pretty much the same. I mean, it's not as one-to-one of a correspondence, in terms of who you're looking for in a heterosexual relationship, if you're heterosexual. But still, it's the same kind of thing. So a girl with an older sister that always looked up to the older sister is more likely to find a guy that they look up to, whereas the older sister is more likely to find a guy that is, again, receptive to feedback, if that's how her younger sister was. So really think about this stuff, because you may have thought about it in terms of how you relate to your parents, or does your relationship replicate the observed dynamic between your parents. But most people do not think deeply enough about how do the behaviors that I exhibited with my sibling and the tenor of that relationship, how are those carrying over into my expectations about how relationships will go in my intimate life now, my marriage, right? And of course, there's a lot about how people with siblings are triggered when their kids interact in ways that are negative. Like, for example, if you were always fighting with your sibling, then your kids fighting is probably going to trigger you a lot because you remember how upsetting it was. But that's in the parenting realm. And most people can understand that. Like if I have an only child as a client, they'll frequently say something like, it's really hard for me when the kids fight because I didn't grow up around any kids fighting because I'm an only child, right? So that's like a one-to-one, like how was I as a kid? How are my kids, and how do those things impact each other, my childhood and the childhood of my own children currently. But people do not think as much as they should about what about the ways that I learned how to interact with my sibling for better and worse? What about the personality of my sibling? What about the match between us? Was I the more outgoing one with a more shy sibling? Was I the shy one with an outgoing sibling? Was I the uncool one with a cool sibling? Was I the unathletic one with an athletic sibling, or vice versa? What was the way that I learned to think about myself vis-a-vis my siblings? Both of them or more of them, because you have individual relationships with each of them. And all of this stuff is it's even more salient the more time you spend with your sibling in the house. And therefore, what I mean by that, of course, is the lower the age difference is, then the more pronounced birth order effects are. That's in the research literature. And the more relevant the relationship is. Because if you're only 1 year apart or 2 years apart, you're spending a lot of time together. You don't even have any memories without your sibling to a large degree. So I hope you guys found this interesting. Another thing to bring up with your therapist if you have one. And of course, if you don't, reach out to my practice, Best Life Behavioral Health. And we have therapists, we have coaches. A lot of people don't understand that coaches can work anywhere. And so that's more beneficial. Not everybody needs a therapist. Not everybody has a diagnosis and something that they really want to work on that's like clinical depression, generalized anxiety disorder. A lot of people just want to kind of live their best life, which is why we're called Best Life Behavioral Health. Anyway, talk to you guys soon. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.